when you get up around 18, 19, you're not talking pedophilia anymore, to the best of my knowledge. It really is, in my understanding, preteen children. I think that's a reasonable cutoff point. Although we could throw early teens in there, 13, 14, 15. So yeah, it gets a little gray in there, in that area, in terms of what's pedophilia and what's not. But we're still talking children, let's make no mistake about it. And this is one of the things that I find annoying, is that I believe, based on things that he has actually said, that UUA moderator Jim Key decided in his mind that the teenage Tibetan refugees who were repeatedly raped by Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell were not children. That may or may not be the case, because he lied anyway. He outright lied about sex abuse of children in what was supposed to be a UUA Board of Trustees official apology to victims of clergy sexual misconduct that he inserted into his first moderator's report to a Unitarian Universalist Association General Assembly in 2014. In June of 2014, UUA moderator James C. Key, also known as Jim See No Evil Key, stood up in a big arena in, I think it was Providence, Rhode Island, and I think it was the Dunkin' Donuts Center or something like that, kind of appropriate in some ways. He stood up in this large arena in front of thousands of Unitarian Universalists who were attending the Unitarian Universalist Association's General Assembly. Oh, there's Curtis Murphy. Hey Curtis, how does it feel to be totally complicit in the Unitarian Universalist Association's misuse of blasphemy law to hide such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape? Does it feel good? So that's Curtis Murphy, who is a prospective Unitarian Universalist minister, so I really want to make damn sure that he knows where I think he stands and where he does stand, because I haven't seen Curtis Murphy speak out against the Unitarian Universalist Association's misuse of blasphemy law to hide pedophilia and rape. I haven't heard not one single Unitarian Universalist minister has publicly spoken out against this, with one possible exception. I think, if I remember correctly, in a tweet, Reverend Lara Hoke may have expressed her disapproval of this some years ago, because the accusation was made in 2012, and I did tweet about it sometime later. I think there might be one tweet out there by Reverend Lara Hoke in which she expresses her disapproval of the Unitarian Universalist Association's misuse of blasphemy law to hide such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape. However, I'm not 100% sure about that. It's just a possibility. I seem to remember vaguely that she put out, it wasn't like the strongest condemnation, but I think she kind of acknowledged that it wasn't correct. However, tweets are very ephemeral. I mean, Twitter, you put out a tweet and it can easily be disappear. It can easily not be read by more than a small handful of people, or so it's not very public, really. Even though it's in the public domain, you put out a tweet, and within minutes it's buried under thousands of other tweets. So how many people actually see them is open to some question. So anyway, getting back to Jim Key, and his utterly worthless official apology to victims of clergy sexual misconduct that he delivered on behalf of the UUA Board of Trustees during the 2014 UUA General Assembly. Here's an exact quote from his worthless apology. "There were no incidents of abuse of children or elders in my investigations." So Jim Key is saying, I investigated clergy sexual misconduct, and in my investigations of clergy sexual misconduct, I found no evidence of abuse of children or elders, as if Unitarian Universalist ministers go after the elder members of the congregations for sexual gratification. I mean, it's not impossible, but, you know, as a rule, I'm sure they go after the more desirable congregants. And of course, in the case of pedophiles, they go after children. Jim Key was certainly aware of the fact that Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell had been charged, tried, and convicted of such despicable crimes as rape. Sorry, as I said, I don't characterize Mac Wallace Mitchell as a pedophile rapist. That's reserved for other Unitarians who rape younger children than Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell raped. But so I think to some extent Jim Key may have disingenuously rationalized the teenage victims of Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell as not being children. But that being said, James Key, risk management consultant and UUA moderator, knew about cases of actual pedophilia. I personally told Jim Key of some of the cases of pedophilia that I was aware of. Cases where ministers have been charged, tried, and convicted of sexual abuse of preteen children. So I personally told Jim Key about some of these cases that I was aware of. Not all of them, by the way. And I cannot imagine that other people, other advocates for victims of clergy sexual misconduct within the Unitarian Universalist religious community did not tell Jim Key about cases where Unitarian Universalist ministers were charged, tried, and convicted of pedophilia specifically. It's almost unimaginable that Reverend Deborah Pope Lance or Reverend Gail Seavey and other advocates for clergy sexual misconduct victims did not tell Jim Key that there were a certain number of cases involving pedophilia, sexual abuse of preteen children. I mean, it's not impossible. I suppose Jim Key, might have talked with the Reverend Deborah Pope Lance, might have talked with Reverend Gail Seavey, might have talked with Fred Muir, might have talked with various other advocates for victims of clergy sexual misconduct or other people who are in the know about Unitarian Universalist clergy misconduct, and for whatever reasons, none of them, not one of them, told him about cases of pedophilia. But I did. And I recorded my side of the phone conversation on video and put it up on YouTube so anyone can go see it. Just go to YouTube and search for Rob and Edgar Conversation Jim Key, and you can watch. There's actually, I think, 3 or 4 videos because the way the camera records, it does so many minutes, and then it cuts out and cuts in again, and it only does half an hour at a time. I think my conversation with Jim Key, if I remember correctly, it was over an hour. It was somewhere around an hour and a half. So I spoke with Jim Key on the phone in September of 2013. I think it was early September. I think it was the 2nd, if I remember correctly. But yeah, early September of 2013, I had a phone conversation with Jim Key. And the purpose of that phone conversation was, to not only inform Jim Key about Unitarian Universalist clergy misconduct matters, and not just sexual misconduct, but also non-sexual misconduct. But also, one of the primary purposes of that phone conversation was towards the end of having Jim Key, in his capacity as moderator of the Unitarian Universalist Association, to do what his job description says he should do, and that is to hold UUA President Reverend Dr. Peter Beyond Belief Morales and other top-level UUA leaders accountable for totally violating most, if not all, of Unitarian Universalism's 7 principles, as long as totally disregarding and betraying a centuries-old tradition of opposing blasphemy laws by falsely accusing me of blasphemous libel and legal bullying that was intended to keep such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape committed by certain Unitarian Universalist ministers out of the public eye as much as possible. So Jim Key was told by me personally about pedophilia, about sexual abuse of preteen children, cases where ministers were charged, tried, and convicted and went to jail. And yet, he stood up in front of thousands of Unitarian Universalists, and in what was supposed to be an official apology, said, and I quote, "There were no incidents of abuse of children or elders in my investigations." And that's it for this protest on the last Sunday of January 2017, the year of the rooster in the Chinese calendar.